It is with great pleasure to have you again on another edition of Press R. Ladies and gentlemen, stay calm. We're going to have a good program today, as always. In a memorial mass in 2014, Pope Francis said, I quote, "Corruption is paid by the poor," end of quote. This applies to the situation in Cameroon and those who suffer much more than others in the situation of corruption are the poor. But this is not to say that the poor are passive actors in the sustainability of corruption. So it is not an overstatement to say that everybody is involved. Yes, you may want to ask me, what about those who cannot give, those who cannot take, or those who do not even influence corruption in any way? Then I will tell you that their silence alone gives room for corruption to thrive. Now, for the poor not to pay the heavy price of corruption, we have to go beyond saying, I cannot give, I cannot take. We have to commit more and say, I will not let it happen. I think it's that commitment that makes corruption actively to go away by general participation. That is the drive we have today as we look at the topic corruption in Cameroon, which is a vice, and unfortunately it has come to stay, and we are fighting to let it go. The question we would like to ask to get answers is this corruption choking? Is it suffocating those who are fighting it? If not, why has it made a bed in our country? We're also going to look at another topic, which is topical and is making people feel very uncomfortable, even in very high places. The social media. Is it doing more harm than good? We're also going to tackle this, because just this week, the Minister of Communication and the Technical Minister of Post and Telecommunications they granted a joint press conference showing how people have misused social media to the detriment of their own country. Ladies and gentlemen, stay there as we give you the best we have. And we're going to discuss these two topics and more with a full house. We have Barrister Fombat Munjem. He's a barrister law. Barrister, you're going to tell us the legal implications of corruption and also of those who misuse social media. You're welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for welcoming me in the panel.
Yes, next to you is Victor Cham. Victor Cham is the publisher of Municipal Updates. It's a newspaper. He is also the publisher of another newspaper, the Chronicle Times. Victor, is this the first time you're coming to Press?
Not quite.
Okay, you're welcome.
I'm a regular customer to the program.
You're welcome.
Thank you very much. My pleasure.
Here with us on the set also, we have Reverend Pastor Emmanuel Masok. He is parish pastor, PCC in Semeyon here in Yaoundé. He was formerly at Bastos. He is now PC in Semeyon, is hosting him. And we know that he is the Secretary Committee of the Ministry of the Presbyterian Church in Cameroon. We're honored to have you here, Pastor.
Thank you very much for giving me the chance to re-echo the moral perspective in the fight against corruption.
You're welcome. Here, close to me, we have Mr. Etom Alfred. Mr. Etom Alfred is a research officer at the National Anti-Corruption Commission. He particularly is here as the coordinator of the National Anti-Corruption Strategy. So there's no other person who can tell us what the national strategy against corruption is doing. And before we come and settle down to discuss these topics, we have our starter, we have our kicker, the week in review in our press review, done by Emmanuela Vemnui. Emmanuela?
The state of the Babaju Bamenda Road received a lot of media attention this week. New MPs confront Public Works Minister over Babaju Bamenda Road, headlines The Guardian Post. The Cameroon Tribune, MPs request government action on the stretch of road, as The Guardian Post further cries out, who will rescue Anglophone regions. To the paper, most divisional headquarters of the two regions cannot boast of 2 kilometers of tarred road. This when gun battles continue to claim lives. Another humanitarian worker is killed by Amber Boys in Kumba Southwest region on the Horizon newspaper, an act that receives widespread condemnation on the Post newspaper. The Sun reports of fury as separatists kill health worker working for Doctors Without Borders. But suspected Ambazonian fighters kidnap at least 50 from a market in Lebialem on the Guardian Post before gunmen kill night watch for allegedly collaborating with military on the same paper. Then presumed murderers of Florence Ayafo unmasked on the median. To the Voice, 2 nabbed for horrendous murder of prison wardress. Happening when 483 ex-Amba and ex-Boko Haram fighters have surrendered on the Horizon newspaper. CONAC then goes tough on government, decries anti-corruption law, non-implementation of Article 66 on declaration of assets. To the Post, CONAC recovers 1,600 billion CFA francs from embezzlers. At a time, BIA sets stringent guidelines on 2020 state budget on the Post newspaper. Cameroon Tribune presents the head of state orientations of the 2021 budget before bidding farewell to outgoing American ambassador to Cameroon, Peter Henry Ballerin, an act seen by the Guardian Post as BIA silencing doomsayers and receives outgoing U.S. ambassador. The reconstruction plan of the Northwest-Southwest continue to receive thumbs up. Newswatch headline, CPD and Baron backs initiative, says it is BIA's apology to Anglophones. Pa Pitangu, CEO of Farmer House, backs BIA's Marshall Plan for Northwest-Southwest on the horizon. Then government selects 6 councils for pilot phase of labor-intensive program. As PCC teachers suspend strike action, Mayor sues SDO over abuse of power when hundreds of primary school teachers march on Yaoundé to decry fraud, irregularities, injustices in recent recruitment. The Voice cries out to be a victim of smear campaign in line with government assistance. Press. According to the paper, it is the lone English tabloid left out. Just when Cameroonian students on scholarship in Morocco accuse government of neglect, the Arch 2020 is suspended due to the spread of COVID-19. Let's now end our press review with this story on the Guardian Post, wherein a widow has been sued for renaming children she had with her late husband after boyfriend. It is reported that Victorine had 3 kids in her former marriage before the death of her husband, after which she got into another amorous relationship with a married man, Pierre. Pierre then abandoned his own matrimonial home and moved in with Victorine. Victorine's children's birth certificates were allegedly changed for them to now bear the name of their mother's new lover. The court case was adjourned till September 11. Until I come your way again, this is your Hour with the Press.
Thank you very much, Emanuela. You followed the press review with us, also with our panelists here on the set. Barrister, when we talk about corruption, our focus today as a man of law, barrister at law, how do you feel when you see a vice like corruption that has come to make a bed with us in the society?
Yes, I think for me as a lawyer, the solution is there. It's very simple, extremely simple. All we need to do is to apply existing laws. We need to stop this act of impunity, and maybe some other laws need a little bit of polishing, but they essentially lies in the hands of the judiciary. The solution is in the hands of the judiciary.
You're part of that?
I do.
It means, without concluding, you are not doing your job?
Yeah, I think that we need to wake up.
Okay.
The judiciary will need to wake up.
So you feel bad that this is
Yes, I
happening
feel bad
in
that
society.
we are not actually coming up to the task to be able to combat corruption. I think we need a lot more to do within the judiciary to be able to make a more effective fight and to give a more significant contribution towards the fight against corruption.
You're going to tell us more about that when we go into developing the topic.
That's right.
Yes, Victor Cham, when you see corruption condemned by everybody in the society, but the thing is with us, you begin to ask, everybody is condemning. Why is it still here? How do you feel?
Condemned by everybody, but carried out by everybody. Everybody is guilty of corruption, if I may put it that way. At home, at the job site, on the streets. It means that all of us must put our hands on deck and combat this cankerworm. Implementation in terms of execution.
Yes, we're going to.
It means that all of us are guilty of corruption in one way or the other. Wife to the husband, parents to the children, boss to the employees,
Some
so on and so forth.
Some active, some passive.
Exactly.
We have to underline that because there are people who actively will not be involved in corruption. Reverend, corruption is a moral problem. You are a moral authority. What has happened that our morals have gone down so low that, as they say, everybody is involved in corruption, which is a vice, and it's causing a lot of havoc to our development.
Yes, it's a very, very sad situation, but I will not be very blunt on the way they are. Spiritually, corruption is wrong. Morally, it's a problem. But ethically, it's a challenge, because ethically will mean there are people who, by their own disposition, will not want to do corruption, but they are forced by the surrounding circumstances.
Okay.
That's an ethical issue,
Okay.
or sociological also. So you can't just draw a line that everybody is corrupt.
We're going to go deep into that. We have also with us here Mr. Tom Alfred. He is the coordinator of the National Anti-Corruption Strategy in the National Anti-Corruption Commission, CONAC. Tell us what's happening. Means you don't have enough arsenal means to fight this corruption?
Well, thank you for inviting CONAC and for inviting me in this panel. Let me first, as they rightly say, we have two main dimensions here in corruption. We have the spiritual dimension or the moral dimension, and then the legal and the judicial dimension. Barrister talked only, or let's say he dwelt only on the judicial and legal dimension of corruption. As he rightly said, or they rightly said, we are all, I would not say corrupt, but if you think we have not done anything to combat corruption or to curb corruption in this Cameroon, we are all guilty of that. Educationists, journalists, parents, religious leaders, lawyers, and everybody. Because CONAC, CONSUPE, and others alone cannot fight successfully corruption in this country. So if we have failed, then everybody in this society has failed.
Yes, we're going to go deeper into that. Just tell us, where are we with the fight against corruption as we speak?
Well, let me compare two situations. You compare the situation 2010 when CONAC went operational and the situation of today. Things have moved. Things have changed positively. But they are low changing because we cannot change the society overnight. People don't change overnight. It needs perseverance. It needs effort to change people. So the only thing I would say now is that we are on the right track. Let me just give you a figure that was recently given.
Announced
yes.
1,600 billion recovered.
Yes, more than. You see, from embezzlers, these are efforts that CONAC, CONSUPE, and if the Supreme Court, the audit bench of the Supreme Court, and the Special Criminal Court are doing. You see, and as I said this week, are you satisfied? I say yes and no. We are satisfied because the situation has changed from the year 2010 to what we are witnessing today. Things are changing. They're not fast changing, but they are changing. Then we have little satisfaction. But we are not satisfied because this anti-corruption struggle is left only in the hands of public institutions, whereas everybody should put, and it's a must, must put hands on deck and make sure that
now let me ask you this question.
Curbed.
What does CONAC, the National Anti-Corruption Commission, do? Does it investigate and just report? Does the National Anti-Corruption Commission have any powers to go ahead and implicate or follow somebody up to the judiciary to court?
What we actually do...
Is that not where you failed?
What we do is that we're doing the most with the very little means that we have. What we do is that when a case of corruption is reported to us, we investigate, we collect the evidence, and we send it to the courts. Because we don't have powers to prosecute, you see. If you are caught red-handed, then we just immediately send your file to the State Council. But then for top-ranking officials, then we report the case to the head of the Republic. And let me tell you, because there's something that people often say, that we investigate cases and we publish our reports 2 or 3 years later. When we publish our reports, it simply means a lot of action has already been taken. Some of the issues that are in our reports have found a solution. So it's not when we publish the reports that action is going to be taken. Action has already been taken. But we are just telling Cameroonians that this is what we did from this period to this period.
Yeah. Pastor, it's a moral problem. It is also even in church. We can say this with your...
Yes, go ahead. You're right. You're correct.
So we have corruption everywhere.
Yes.
What actually is happening with the morals of our countrymen and countrywomen, that they have made corruption a way of life, and you, the moral authorities, are there?
Yes, if he has just mentioned that there's been a progress, I think it is because of the moralization. It's because of the constant education we do in the church. And I'm telling you the truth, we have rebuked our members. We have moralized them through teachings. We have invited them on one-on-one. In some extreme cases, we have even rejected some of the gifts that they offer to the church.
I was going to ask you
It's just because with spirituality, you have to respect the people, their confessional secrets. You cannot divulge them to the public.
Okay.
But we have done this. Okay. And some of the payback, the restitution that is being done, it has come from our offices where we have moralized and asked, go and return the things you have collected.
Oh, good.
In some cases, they bring them to us.
And what do you do? You take?
No. We had them where it is. When you hear they say they have recovered, okay, we hand them to the appropriate bodies. It's just because when somebody makes a confession, you cannot divulge it in public.
Okay.
But I want to say that sometimes we talk much about what has not been done instead of talk about what has been done.
Okay.
And I think every Cameroonian today know that they have a role to play in the fight against, because it hinders total development. I think one time I received Reverend Dr. Masigams to my office in Bastos when I used to be Presbyterian Secretary. It was a meeting we held to see how we can cooperate to fight against this.
Okay.
So, but take note that issues of human behavioral patterns, issues that deals with people's internalized beliefs and practices, it takes time to reorientate them.
Okay, Cham Victor, you are a journalist, and your profession is not exempted from this. It is known in Cameroon that journalists elsewhere, it's called yellow envelopes. In Cameroon, it's called gombo. It all boils down to one thing: bribes. How do you fight it in your own level? First of all, you acknowledge that you have a lot of it in the media.
We have a lot of it, yes. I can't deny that fact. And also we have to understand that the system in place should also permit journalists to operate under conducive I'm talking about economic atmosphere, good economic atmosphere.
What do you mean by
Because economic hardship is what pushes journalists to collect gombo, what they call gombo, or freebies or whatever. And also, I think that this aspect of underpayment, I'm a trained journalist in the University of Boya, and you don't expect me, let's say for example, I am married, I'm working under you without no pay, or without an insignificant pay package. So now it is tempting. The pastor said it's tempting, even though they say it's not a sin when you are tempted to do something and you do it. But again, I think that is a very bad practice. And that is why, of recent, journalist associations have been working hard to improve on the conditions of work of various media houses. And they have blamed government for insignificant subventions. And that is why the Minister of Communication, Rene Sadi, launched a press subvention for journalists, for newspapers and online media, and they applied. And from what obtains as of now, it was significant somehow.
Yes, you got your own share?
Yeah.
You got your own share?
I did not. I'm not a year old as a publisher.
Okay.
I'm sure this year I will have mine, and I'm sure it's an opportunity for me to promote my workers and, of course, make them feel comfortable. And why not go beyond what people expect? I think as a journalist and as a publisher, it is my wish that workers, that's journalists, received the best treatment whatsoever the situation.
Okay, we look forward to seeing you fight corruption better than now when you get more empowered. Yes, Barrister, you stated earlier that the frontline people who are supposed to press the neck of corruption and probably kill it is the judiciary, and you are part of them. What is wrong with our laws that we cannot fight and eliminate, eradicate this corruption?
There is nothing wrong with our laws as per se. The laws are there, clearly written, very good laws. Our main problem is application. We need just to apply the existing laws. I'm sure we don't even need any education, because I think everybody, the average Cameroonian, knows what it means to be corrupt, what is corruption, what is not a corrupt act. If you look at Article 184 of the Penal Code, that article sanctions corruption extremely severely. Not like any other act of theft. Corruption by Article 184, it says that if anyone whosoever, which means there's no discrimination, whosoever, by whatever means, whosoever by whatsoever means. So it is not it does not discriminate to the person, it does not discriminate to the means that you use to carry the corrupt act or act of embezzlement of public property. And it says, if the value of the property is above 500,000 francs, you are liable to a life jail.
Life imprisonment.
You are liable to life jail if the value of the property is above 500,000 francs. And even if you are benefiting from mitigating circumstances from the court, in no way should you are sentenced to less than 10 years imprisonment. Which means that if you embezzle government funds, if the amount is above 500,000 francs, there's no way you can serve less than a 10 years prison term.
That's severe.
That is extremely severe. But I'm saying now, it comes now for me to emphasize, I think the problem is that of impunity.
Okay.
Impunity in the sense that the law is supposed to be applied and effectively and immediately, which means those who commit acts of corruption or acts of embezzlement should be punished immediately. You know, one of the cardinal points why criminal law, or they say a crime and the offense, and act, the crime and the corresponding offense, the main reason is to serve as a deterrent factor, which means it should act as that frightening.
Should be like a moving train.
Like a moving train.
If you stay on its way, you'll be crushed.
You'll be crushed.
Okay.
So you can imagine that if everybody that committed an offense was prosecuted immediately and made known, then the public will understand the effectiveness of this law, and the frightful aspect of it will be portrayed. But if we find a situation where people are prosecuted just because it is said they oppose the government, or because they will look at the chair of the head of state, it now defeats that deteriorating aspect of the law. Those who are now in office, they will say, I can steal and go free provided I don't oppose the government. I can steal and go free provided I don't hide the post of the head of state. That is one of the factors that make people in office, despite the fact that we have these very, very severe laws, you still find them involved in acts of corruption. it is going from top to bottom. I'll
Yes.
take a simple example at the bottom. Let me take one simple example at the bottom.
Yes.
You get police officers who go to the road to control traffic offences. And at the end of the tunnel, we are supposed to get into the public treasury penalties for traffic offences. But we don't get any of the penalties. Are we saying that road users automatically have become so regular? But you see them, you see them overloaded, you see rash driving every
that
day.
example is clear enough. It means that is a behavioral problem. And I have indication that our special viewer is on the line to give us his opinion about corruption. Why is it that corruption has become a way of life? When even the President of the Republic, when he came to power in 1982, he made moralization, rigor and moralization his principle. Our special viewer for today is Professor Paul Nkui. Professor, if you are with us, please, how do we explain that people decide to make corruption a way of life, despite the fact that it's a vice?
Basically, all humans have an inbuilt feeling in them of gratitude for a favor done. And therefore, probably what has now taken geometric proportions in form of what we now call corruption is probably an exaggeration of a normal human gesture. I remember, if I go back to the early days when I was in the service of the state, and our president came into power, and his concern was how to purify and how to strengthen the moral fabric of our nation by introducing his policy of rigor and moralization. And what was he saying? He himself was fed up of the little corruption that did exist. But today, when you see the levels of corruption in our country, today such what was there in the 80s is simply a child's play. So most of us who have lived through the system have seen how slowly and gradually these inert emotions of paying gratitude have actually been blown out of proportion. And to such an extent that everybody thinks for you to be able to get a service you have to pay for. Extend that civil servants and people entrusted with public office are now marketing those services. And I think this is what we call corruption. Because every civil servant, every minister, every politician is given power by the people through the electoral system. But that power that is given to you is expected to be used for the good of the people. But if you abuse that power by marketing or by using that power to enrich yourself, then it is way beyond the rules of law and morality. And I think this is where we have arrived. And right now, teacher, I've been teaching for the past 40-something years. And what I now hear in the classroom when I teach is my students keep saying, "Sir, you are training us. How are we going to get jobs?" because it's virtually impossible to get a job or to get to a professional schools without somebody paying for, or without somebody reaping up from the little you may have. So that is the situation in which we are today, and corruption has virtually become one of the canker worms of our society. The creation of CONAC, I think, was a response to the intensity of the corrupt nature of our society. Because at virtually every level, teachers in school, right? Government civil services, politicians who have to buy votes, and even people, the people who vote virtually have mortgaged their consciences by receiving little chicken feed. Where does it take us? And I think the level of corruption also defines the level of morality of a given society.
Stay with us, Prof. Don't go away yet. We're going to come back to you. We take you, ladies and gentlemen, to the set. I come back to you, Mr. Atom Alfred. From what he's saying, are you focusing on the macro fight of corruption, picking those big people, while in neglecting the other ones down there, as he has said, buying some things and eventually overtakes the whole society?
No, we are not neglecting anything. You know, there's what we call petty corruption and grand corruption. So we are fighting both petty and grand corruption. The thing with you journalists is that when we go and arrest those, let's say, accused of petty corruption, it doesn't sell your newspapers. That's why you don't publish them.
Okay.
It's only
But you do that all the time.
we catch big fish. That's where you come with your cameras. Okay. So we don't neglect either, be it petty or grand corruption. We put in as much effort as we can. You see?
Yes, Reverend, he insisted on morality there.
Yes, what I have gathered from what all of them are saying, especially the journalists and professor, the ethical aspect, people are doing things that in normal circumstances they would not do. As a pastor, I try to draw a line between morality and ethics. In normal circumstances, would they be doing what they are doing?
So what do you suggest?
So therefore, in fighting corruption, let us make it easier and give people the capacity to do good and to function in a moral way.
Okay, we'll go back to Prof. and let him be while we are here. Prof, I hope you are still with us. As an anthropologist, how can we, at the level of behavior in society, remedy this problem, which is a moral problem, and it's corruption? Prof?
I think, given the stage in which we are in terms of corruption, I think we need a moral rearmament. We need to design programs and projects that have an inbuilt of law and morality, where merit and meritocracy is the rule. I think unless we go back on the drawing board and therefore redesign our teaching programs, not only the programs by changing the nature of those programs, but also training the teachers. Well, how are you going to deal with teachers today who themselves bought their way to where they are? Let me cite you maybe a little example of a guy from the Northwest Province who came to Yaoundé to follow up his file. There's a guy who had retired, who was living out there, but who came to Yaoundé. And he says, look, your file is stocked in the Ministry of Finance. And they identified the person who was treating the file. And the guy says, Monsieur, honest, the truth. This guy, what did he understand? He just understood that the guy needed fish. So he goes to the market, buys a bunch of dry fish,
He said, on the truth,
comes back to the who is treating his file, said, Monsieur, you said you didn't have fish. Now here is the fish. But it took the guy to explain to him that fish doesn't mean fish. But this guy knew. The guy from the Northwest, who is following his file, knew that files don't move without them being moved. And so he thought this particular individual needed fish. Now, a real problem is not only educate doing a moral rearmament program, we also need to train and to improve the living conditions of those who are serving us. Because corruption may be due to poor governance, may be due to low salaries. A guy who is being paid 100 and something thousand, but he lives a life of 200,000.
Thank you very much, Prof. We must acknowledge here that your remedy is a recipe that can work if it is followed. Thank you once again, Prof, for contributing live on Press Out today. Okay, we're going to continue where Prof left us. You followed what he said. We have a second topic. We're just going to be brief and reacting. Barrister, you've listened to him. You say the problem with our laws is application. But CONAC is here trying to make sure that the laws are applied. At least that's why they came up with a recovery of 1,600 billion CFA francs, more than that, he says. So there's also Article 66 of the Constitution. How do we put that into practice?
If we want to look first at Article 66 of the Constitution, I will want to go take a few steps behind. You know, I said in the first part of my opening statement that there is the application of the laws. We also need some fine-tune. We need to modify some laws. There are some existing laws that need to be modified. When I look at the United Nations Convention Against Corruption, which was adopted in 2003 and entered into force in 2005, and Cameroon ratified this law in 2004 to show you that then the government shows the will to fight corruption.
Yes.
The government shows the will. But when I look at certain acts again, I start asking myself whether that will is there. Because when we come back to Article 66 of the Constitution, this is a constitution that was put in place in 1996 with Article 66 that talks about declaration of assets. It took 10 years for the law on declaration of assets to be promulgated. That law was promulgated in 2006. And in that law, what is stifling that law is that the assets have to be declared before a commission that has to be appointed by the head of state. Since 2006 up till today, that commission has not been put in place. The decree of the commission has not been put in place.
I am told that they are doing it and they must not bring it out publicly. He made mention.
The commission, yes.
He made mention of the United Nations Convention. And I know CONAC is also involved in that.
And then I will round up. Let me round up one. Yes. I will round up. When you look at the United Nations Convention on the fight against corruption or against corruption, one article that pulls my attention is Article 20, which says member states should enact laws that incriminate illicit enrichment. And in that law, that article goes to define what is illicit enrichment. By that article, illicit enrichment means significant increase in the assets of a public servant that cannot reasonably be explained in relation with the lawful income of that civil servant. So if we have a crime on illicit enrichment, I'm sure that it will also go to give a big bolster to the fight against corruption. But again, I have a small problem with the law on the CONAC.
Let me just say, there is a national investigation agency, ANIF, which actually, to the best of my knowledge, that's the work is doing. You are the person involved.
I think before he comes in, I should react so that he will just combine our two reactions together.
Briefly, I will come to you.
Yes.
Briefly, what is that ANIF, and what the barrister is saying is so grievous?
Well, barrister is raising the issue of systematic sanction.
Yes.
You see, this issue, I do agree with him that in a society, if you systematically sanction people, you deter them from doing something.
Yes.
But now there's hope.
Yes.
There's hope because on the 1st of April this year,
yes,
the Convention of African Union on Preventing and Combating Corruption has been ratified by Cameroon. The provisions of these conventions are all mandatory, which means that Cameroon is now somehow obliged to enforce those provisions by now enacting specific laws on illicit enrichment, on non-declaration of assets, and on protection of whistleblowers, victims, and actors of corruption, and on laundering the proceeds of corruption.
Okay.
So there's some hope.
Thank you. Please, we have a second topic. We have a second topic.
My worry, I have a worry. And
Yes,
I must say,
briefly.
Because
Briefly, go ahead. Briefly, go ahead.
All this debate is because CONAC, like people always say, backs but doesn't bite. CONAC needs to be empowered.
CONAC will bat you, then
CONAC needs to be empowered. Yeah, no,
CONAC will bat you.
He has a point.
CONAC needs to be empowered
he has a point.
so that when they recover this money, they should set an example.
Okay.
And now, let me continue. Last Friday, some 5 officials in the Ministry of Finance were given medals for hard work for recovering over 200 billion francs CFA by the Ministry of Finance in Yaoundé. Those are good examples for Cameroonians to copy, that the fight against corruption should go beyond CONAC.
Okay.
And lastly, we said that people buy their way into professional schools. I will say with all objectivity that not all young Cameroonians who go into ENS and then buy their way.
They don't corrupt.
Thank you.
Not all.
It's okay.
I know of some who
the
have
point,
passed.
Victor,
on merit.
Victor, that is correct. The point you made a point. Lady,
yes, I wanted to talk about responsible behavior and the use of deterrent forces. But I think they're using deterrent. He's talking more about deterrent forces. I'm talking more about responsible behavior.
Moral rearmament.
Yes, if we decide to equip people to have a responsible way of doing things, we'll achieve more than just simply using deterrent, because each time you try, people will develop new methods.
Okay, that's why it is persisting right up to today.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. We have barely 15 minutes to treat the second topic. Thank you for your patience. The next topic we're going to treat is social media, which today we agree that social media is technological development and is helping so many of us. But it is also destroying societies and sometimes going into putting the security of the state in jeopardy. This week, the Minister of Communication and his counterpart of the Ministry of Telecommunications had a joint press conference, and Ewanipole covered that for us, and this is the report he put together. After that, we're going to discuss. Ewanipole.
The press conference, jointly granted by the Ministers of Communication René Emmanuel Sadi and Madame Libom Liliken of Post and Telecommunications, centered on the social media platforms that impacts negatively on the population and government in particular. The minister focused on the increasingly recurrent media drifts within the national public space and mostly on the observation of a propensity for systematic misinformation carried out by certain traditional media and through social media.
This manipulative and distorting frenzy is even more accentuated in the media treatment of the security situation in the Northwest and Southwest regions. In this regard, some have deliberately chosen to misrepresent the facts, depending on the circumstances in which these occur, and for hidden purposes, alleged victims of the tyranny of the government and of our defense and security forces. In the same way, the numerous atrocities committed by the armed bands in these regions are concealed, while the Cameroonian army, which is legitimately engaged in a fight for the preservation of our territorial integrity and the security of goods and people, is constantly being conspired, demonized, and stigmatized.
The Minister of Communication also reiterated government's commitment to continue supporting media professionals who have chosen to identify themselves as professional journalists. He added that true and good journalism must remain noble par excellence.
Indeed, Iwane Pole, as the minister said, why those ones remain noble and professional, there are those who use social media to denigrate, to destroy. Victor, you are of the media. The situation is really bad.
Not only bad, but deadly. Because I would describe the social media as a deadly public court. The judge crucified and sentenced to death, not even to imprisonment. And that is why of recent fake news, propaganda, and impersonation has taken over the social media. People just impersonate, say you're a minister of this, you're writing this, there's people share, and there's some belief in it. And now, the aspect of fake news is what is causing the disorder of the day. Because people want to hear only bad news. And that is where the social media now has taken over the routine of propagating fake news, which doesn't reflect what obtains in the society.
Yes, Victor, I stay with you. You are a media person, and generally you sit around with your colleagues, publishers and reporters, and then those who publish those things, what do they tell you is behind they are doing such things?
First of all, the first thing is that you may not even know who is doing that. Because Facebook, for example, has the possibility of creating fake accounts. And those fake accounts publish news, fake news. So you can be with me and I have a fake account and I break a news. You don't know that I'm the one because the name there is not my name. Well, so now, when we sit like that, we discuss on how fake news and other vices have taken over the social media. Our first approach or first aspect that we discuss is, why do they do this? Frustration or what? Now, we discover that people are hungry for bad news, for nothing.
Okay, we got you, Barrister. He is saying people can create fake accounts, but we know we have Antique. It's the National Agency to fight against all of that, to control, to regulate. Yeah. And they have the capacity, the ability to trace whoever. You cannot create an account without giving some personal information. So where is the law in this? How can these people be tracked down?
I think the law also has found there is the solution in the law with regards to technological development communication using electronic medium. There is a law against communication using electronic medium. That law has equivalent sanctions for every act. That law, most of it refers even to articles of the penal code that sanction acts of false information, sanction acts of spreading of false information. For example, you receive an information that is faulty, yes, you do not initiate that information, but you forward it to another person, so you have committed the offense of spreading false information. So you are sanctioned like the person who initiated the information. Talking about identifying the culprit, it is easy. We have an organ that is trained, well equipped to be able to identify the source of all of this information.
Then what happens that we talk about this and these people are not identified and tracked?
How many Cameroonians know where antique office is found? How many Cameroonians have applied? The few that have gone there to complain, they have been able to trace and identify and arrest those involved in cyber criminality.
Antique spread a number, I can't make it out, but the number has been circulated that if you are a victim, you should send to them. 80, 12 something, I've forgotten.
Very few people. Just like you have forgotten, many people have forgotten too.
I think need to make the services right down there, to the sub-divisional levels.
I stay with you, Barrister.
Yes.
This is what the law says.
Yes.
The confidential information, you are not even supposed to have it. But the way social media functions, you just sit. You have not invited anybody to send it to you. The person takes a very sensitive, confidential information, sends to you. What do you do with it? Because you are not supposed even to have it. You are not also supposed to use it. What do you do with that?
No, with the crime, you have what they call the moral element and then the active element of an offense. If somebody sends information to your phone, you receive the information, you read, you have not committed an offense. The offense starts when you forward it to another person, then you have committed the offense. And so if it comes to your phone and you read, and you close it, you delete it, you have not committed any offense.
Okay.
Yes, it's also a problem in the church. But I think while we are decrying the wrong use of social media, we should also question whether we have created more structures of communication. I think we should also be able to, because sometimes, I know they're really the bad ones, but in other cases, people want to be heard. We are living in the global age. Everybody wants to have a say or own the process. So I think we should also create structures that give feedback mechanism. Communication is anymore where one person is talking. So there should always be a talk and then the talk back mechanism. I think that also will help.
Yes, Mr. Atom, does the National Anti-Corruption Commission use social media in its fight against corruption at all the levels?
Yes, of course, because social media is now a means to corrupt. Is a means to corrupt people.
Yes.
So, yes. Corrupt people always use the tools that are available. Mm-hmm. So the ICT and any other tool to commit their crimes. So what we are doing, that's why we first set up our toll number, free number, that 1517. People have been calling in because some receive, let's say, demand for tips on their phones. So
okay.
Yes, and then they ask you to go Momo me this thing, this amount, and this amount. So corrupt people are also using social media either to destabilize you, or to denounce. Yes, yes. Or even to settle personal scores.
Yes, I was going to ask you, how do you distinguish between somebody who is denouncing genuinely and the one who is settling scores?
From the onset, you cannot know unless you investigate. Yeah. Okay. It's only when you investigate, then you easily, for experts, you easily know this is fake.
Yeah. Victor, it looks like you have a living example.
The weakness is that all government departments, or that's ministries, they are supposed to have departments in charge of social communication, social media. It's very important.
Okay.
Because the age we live in today is a complex one, because, like you said, to see a fake post and a real post, a genuine post,
is very difficult.
But it's simple.
Yeah, for experts, it's very simple.
Yeah, it's simple because
you can easily know.
When you go fact checking, you know that this account has been posting regularly of recent, the historical review of the account.
Okay.
Then the other one you easily know from the background.
Yes.
Which means that it is imperative for all state departments to create departments in charge of social media.
Thank you very much. We have understood. Just behind you, we have Elvis Teke with reactions. Elvis, good day, welcome.
Thank you.
You have reactions from our viewers.
Yes, quite a good number. We may not be able to read all. But with us, we have Joachim Augustine, who said to a greater extent, social media is doing a lot of good because it's exposing many actions, but users, on the other hand, have to be responsible. And he says CONAC has to learn from other examples, like in Rwanda, in the fight against corruption, while King Gong Theodore says the best way to fight corruption is putting in place surveillance cameras in different places. Terry Chamba says take out inam dues and governors be voted and corruption will be put out, while Kelvin Cham says institutions should be completely independent, that is CONAC, and religious studies, civic and moral education should be obligatory in schools, and hypocrisy is the audacity to preach integrity in a corruption den. That is from Prince Mutabeme Opesa. And Sue Blestia says corruption is becoming a way of life, but the way out is to promote the fight against corruption through institutional reform.
Thank you very much, Elvis. We took a good number of those reactions from viewers. We're going to round up. We have barely 2 minutes to go to the end of the program. We're going to take a round of the table with some conclusions, beginning with you, Barrister. Advice to those who use social media without knowing the legal implications.
Technological development is a tool for development, but it must be used responsibly. And as you have rights in the social media, you should also know that you have obligations and you have limits. Everybody should bear that in mind.
Yes,
my advice goes to government.
Is social media doing more harm than good?
Than good, yes. It's doing more harm than good. So my advice is for government to be more effective and efficient. What do I mean? All ministerial departments should have an online presence, just like we have the head of state with online almost every day.
Thank you very much.
And other state authorities.
Yes,
everything that God has created is good. The wrong use of it doesn't make it bad. So therefore, I am calling on people, the Christians, take note that if you are defaming somebody, you're destroying somebody, that's a sin. And you are destroying yourself also. Yes,
you're going to conclude by on corruption. Is corruption choking, suffocating you, the fighters?
No. I'm just saying it's a critical error. It's a critical error to leave anti-corruption issues or anti-corruption struggle in the hands of CONAC alone. Every Cameroonian must ask, what am I doing at my own specific level to stop corruption? That's the only means we can get out of this pandemic.
Thank you very much, gentlemen. We also want to thank you watching us. Cameroon has no problem as a fatherland. Cameroon is diverse, culturally, economically, politically. But what makes it bad is the way we behave, corruption, use of social media. Please, we are called up to use social media well, to readjust our behavior, and we'll make a better society. Thank you once again. That was how we saw it on Press Out today. Be blessed.